it's a tshuva in Choshe Mishpat, where he writes a tshuva, and as the way it goes, at the end you sign off. So he writes the date, Yoim Gimel, Or L'Rosh Chodesh Adar Harishon, Shemar Bim Bo Simcha. So we see that the Chasam Sofer held that even in the first Adar, there's an in of Marbim B'Simcha. So obviously, we're going to pass like the Chasam Sofer, because we can use Simcha, as much Simcha as possible in our lives. Now, there's a very interesting kasha that the Chasam Sofer asks in a different tshuva. We know that the Makar of Mishenechnes Adar Marbim B'Simcha is the Gemara Masechtas Tainis. The Mishnah says Mishenechnes of Mamatin B'Simcha. So the Gemara says, Keshem she Mishenechnes of Mamatin B'Simcha, Kach Mishenechnes Adar Marbim B'Simcha. So the Chasam Sofer says that if you look in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, there's no mention whatsoever about the inner of Mishenechnes Adar Marbim B'Simcha. When it comes to Mishenechnes of Mamatin B'Simcha, we find it both in the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch. But when it comes to Mishenechnes Adar Marbin B'Simcha, we don't find, not in the Rambam and not in the Shulchan Aruch, the inyan of Mishenechnes Adar Marbin B'Simcha. So the Chasam Sofer wants to know, why is that? So the Chasam Sofer has many pshatim, many mahalchim, but Hanoigei Al Inyanenu, the topic today is obviously an interesting topic, and I'm sure many of us wondered what the shaykhs of demons and shadim and witchcraft and so on with Family Day, and I hope that no one expected me to bring any demonstrations or any hands-on, but basically, according to this Chasam Sofer, we can understand the shaykhs, the connection of our shir today with the Indian of where we're holding now. So the Chasam Sofer says that the reason why the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam don't bring the Indian of Mishenechnes Adar Marbim B'Simcha is because the emes is, the Gemara gives an halacha based on this Indian of Mishenechnes of Mamatim B'Simcha and Mishenechnes Adar Marbim B'Simcha. The Gemara says an halacha. What's the halacha? Reb Papa says that if a person has a court case with a goy, do not go with him in Av, because in Av, Bori Mazlei, he has a good mazel, the goyim have a good mazel. And in Adar, where a Yid has a good mazel, we should go. That's the Gemara. And the Shulchan Aruch brings down the halacha by Av, that in Av do not go in a court case with a goy, but in Adar the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it down. So the Chasam Sofer says, I'll tell you why. He says, Yesh Loimar, that Rav Papa Efsher Svirle Yesh Mazal Yisrael. Rav Papa, who says that a person should to look out for Chodesh Adar to make a court case with a goy because Bari Mazle of a Yid, he holds that Yesh Mazal Yisrael, because there's a big machloikus in the Gemara Masechta Shabbos if Yesh Mazal Yisrael or A Mazal Yisrael. So he says Rav Papa, who says this halacha, he holds Yesh Mazal Yisrael. Ba'anan Kaimalon, we pasken Kahana Amiroi B'tanoi the Ein Mazal Yisrael. We pasken that Ein Mazal Yisrael. The Imkain, the Chasam Sofer says, Bishloim b'chodesh of Ikelamechish Debari Mazla Du'Masa'olam. The reason why a Yid should not engage in a court case with a goy is because maybe the goy has a good mazel. By goyim there is mazel. Aval ba'adar mehechet heisel limtzalei. Why should a Yid go and look dafke for Chodesh Adar? The nei the rei mazel. He says that the goyim we don't find dafke that their mazel is a bad mazel in Chodesh Adar. And le'inyam brias mazel the Yisrael ha'em mazel Yisrael. So basically, the Chasam Sofer says that the reason why the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch don't bring this Indian is because the whole Indian would have a shaykhus with the Indian of Yesh Mazal Yisrael. And here we paskin Ein Mazal Yisrael, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch and the Rambam don't bring it. So with this Hakdama, we can start our shir about Inyanim that have a shaykhus to Mazolos and Koichovim and so on, as we will see Be'ezras Hashem. So we will start off with a kasha that a Choshev Yid asked me a while ago, and he asked me as follows. We know that some people, especially by Hasidim, have a minig that on Friday night they don't make Kiddush between 6 and 7. Some people are makbid on it. And the Makar is a Mogen Avram. The Mogen Avram in Hilchas Kiddush says, he brings down Api Kabbalah, you should not make Kiddush between 6 and 7. Why? Because according to the Mazolas, Friday night in the beginning when Shabbos comes in at 6 o'clock, that's when the Mazel Madim, which is bloodshed, that's when the Mazel is shoylet, so you shouldn't make Kiddush in that hour. Now, there's a very interesting Lekutei Mahariach. He brings down that if, for example, a person has to make Kiddush between 6 and 7, for example, we had this winter when Asar B'Tevis was on Friday, so even those people that are makpid between 6, not to make Kiddush between 6 and 7, on such a Friday, everyone makes Kiddush. Some try to make it before 6, but if you can't make it before 6, you can definitely make it between 6 and 7, because you have a whole family waiting and people are fasting. But he brings down that you should say Ava Rachamim, which we say Hu Yerachem Ama Musim, because there it says V'yatzil nafshoseinu min hashois harois. So we should say that to not to have this inyan of between 6 and 7, which is considered a bad hour.
Is that a halachic hour or a time or a regular time, 6 and 7?
It has to do with it's not really here in Toronto. It's approximately 6:20 to 7:20.
Every stat each.
On Toronto, it depends on every week, yeah.
That time of day.
Yeah. So the question is, the Yid asked me a very stark kasha. He says, how can a Yid say this hour is a bad hour? We know that there's a law of loisa oinenu. What does loisa oinenu mean? Loisa oinenu means you should not say shaploini is yafa leploini, shaploini ra ledobra ploini. That's loisa oinenu. A Yid is not supposed to make times. This is good. This is bad. That's the kasha that the Yid asked me. Now the emes is that the Aruch HaShulchan has another kasha on this whole concept of the Mogen Avram, and he says, "V'reisi misha kosav she'yikadosh dafka koydem laila ki b'tchilas leil Shabbos u'mazel madim," and therefore yikadosh b'tzedek. You should make kiddush before madim. He brings this from the Mogen Avram. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, "V'lani es datu hu tomoya v'chaz v'shalom loymer shanachnu tachas hamazalois." But other Rabbi, he says, "Roisi b'katmoinim sha'umas hakatmoinim hoyoyim b'Shabbos b'choshech." He brings down the pre-medieval goyim that lived in the Dark Ages, and that's why it was called Dark Ages. He says because the goyim used to sit in the dark every Friday afternoon, and they cried, "Mipnei shamazon shel Shabbos moirim l'ro." We have to make our Shabbos with candles. We are above all these constellations and horoscope and all these things that exist. He says, so basically, we have here two very legitimate kashas that the Achronim ask. One is, how can we say that this hour is a bad hour? Why isn't that loisa oinenu? And the second thing is, what's with ein mazel Yisrael? So what if there's a bad mazel that's shoylet? We are above the whole inyan of mazolis. That's the kasha that the Achronim ask on this concept, which can apply every single week on Friday night. So, in order to explain this whole concept, we're going to start with a very interesting machloikus rishonim about this whole inyan. What exactly is the inyan of loisa oinenu? So we'll start off with the tour in Siman Kuf Ayin Tes, because basically the shir today is based on halacha. We only want to say what it says in halacha. Someone told me a very interesting thing, that he told me a name of a very choshev HaRav here in Toronto that gave a shir about such type of things, and a few days later or weeks later he passed away. And basically he didn't only speak, he said different things, and so he warned me that I should be careful. So basically I'm only going to say what it says in the halacha, and from there we'll see very, very interesting what the poskim say about this thing. We're not making any own comments. I don't want to add any own comments, and it's something that we should be careful with, because we are dealing here with certain koiches, as we will see. So basically, in order to explain this whole inyan, we're going to start off with the tour in Siman Kuf Ayin Tes in Yeridea, where the tour says as follows: Kotzav Rambam. He brings a Rambam. Ma'oinen. What's a ma'oinen? Ma'oinen means people that make times. Ma'oinen, he says, Elu she'oimrim be'itz tagninus. What's itz tagninus? Itz tagninus means with the stars, the constellations. People that, based on the constellations of the stars, they say Yom Ploini toiv, to do whatever. Yoim ploini, royle, lasses boy malacha, ploinis. Oisha ploinis, ra l'davar ploini. So the Rambam says, this is what's loisa oinenu. If people make times, this is a good time, this is a bad time. But also la'oine, says the Rambam, the Tur brings down, even if only he said, he didn't do anything. He just said, Tuesday, 3 o'clock, no, not a good time to start a trip. Wednesday, 5 o'clock, oh, that's a good time when you can go do a business deal. So the Rambam says, even if he didn't do anything, he just said it, the Rambam says that he said things that these Naronim think is emes. That's a lav of loisa oinenu. Says the Rambam weiter, whoever does something based on this on this concept, he started his new job at a specific time based on this cheshbonis, or he started a trip based on that time. The people that talk and things that they have to do with the sky, because then it's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. So basically, the Rambam says that if a person says a time, it's a lav she'ein b'maisa, but if he does something based on that, it's a lav sheyesh b'maisa. That's the Rambam. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. But if he does a Maisa, then comes again the Beis Yosef, and the Beis Yosef brings a Ramban, and the Ramban starts off with the Gemara in Masechtes Psachim. The Gemara says in Masechtes Psachim, Minayin she'en shoyalim bekaldiim. How do we know that we cannot be shoyal bekaldiim? So the Gemara says where we know it from. The Gemara, we learn it out from a pasuk. Kaldim. Oh. So the question is, what is Kaldim? What is Kaldim? So there's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, and basically Tosfos says that Rashi says it means oiv, balas oiv, which we'll get to later, which is a certain form of witchcraft. But Tosfos says that Kaldim is choizim bekoichovim. How do we know you cannot go to an astrologer to ask him what's the mazel, what mazel is there now? Because we learn out it says Tomim Tia Mashem Elokech. Zog the Ramban, Masha Omru, Ein Shoyalim Bekaldim, Dober Boruhu, that it means Bale Mazolis HaChoizim Bekechovim. We're talking here about people that work with the horoscope and with the constellations, and they say what mazel is. And today, we have internet, you can look it up. It's not something that is one thing for this person, one thing for that person. It's a fact, right? There's a way of a hilach of the kechavim u'mazolos, and in the olden times you needed chachamim to be able to tell you what it is. Today, everyone can figure it out. So the Gemara says, how do we know that you cannot go to these people that they are the shoyel b'kechavim u'mazolos? So the Gemara brings a pasuk Tamim Tiyam Hashem Elokecha. Zok the Ramban, ubevadem mashma she'eno itztagninus bechlal mo'inen u'menachesh. Which means, the Ramban says that if saying a time, mo'inen, based on kechavim u'mazolos, would be a lav of loisa oinenu, why does the Gemara say minayin? What do we mean minayin? It's a beferish lav, loisa oinenu. Zog the Ramban, from here we see that eno itztagninus bechlal nachash mo'inen, the beboilai minayin. And he says weiter, we find in the Gemara that there are amoiroim, heilig amoiroim, that were able to be mechayim mesim. And we're talking about the greatest of our sages, that they hold yesh mazel Yisrael. Reb Chanina holds mazel masher, yesh mazel Yisrael. But after the less hilchas kabal say, we don't pass it like that, but you can't say that someone that says something based on a mazel is over on loisa oinenu, said the Ramban. Why? Because it's a metzias, it's a fact, and we see that they all did it. And when the Gemara says that nichush means there's two types of things. There's loisa oinenu and loisa nachshu. Both are the same type of thing that you say this time or that time, but one is based on a certain hour, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and one is superstition, which means, let's say, a person is about to go on the road, and all of a sudden a squirrel runs by him. It's a simon, it's an omen, it's a bad omen. It's a simon that I shouldn't go on this trip. or the Gemara says, Pitoy noflam miyodoi, makul noflam miyodoi, tzvi ifsikoi baderech. Any type of thing that a person interprets that it's a bad omen, which is called superstition, right? It doesn't make sense. A squirrel and my trip has nothing to do. But in his mind, a black cat type of thing. So the Gemara says, Eilu shemanachshem bekoichovim, that they do this type of things based on the koichovim. Says the Ramban, it doesn't mean koichovim be'itztagninus. Because itztagninus is a metzias. In other words, it's not something that he created in his mind. It's a fact. There's a constellation, there's a horoscope, there's a way things work. What does menachesh b'kechovim means? That he says, if I will go out and I will find a north star pointing this way, that's a simon for this. And if I find that star, in other words, he's making him, he's putting simonim for himself, but not based on the Metzias. So the Ramban says that he wants it to be very clear that Mo'inen Menachesh has nothing to do with Kechovim, with Itztagninus. Itztagninus means the Chochma of Kechovim Mazolis. Because anything that's based on Itztagninus, he says, is not a problem. How do we know? Because he brings rayas from the Gemara, the mutar lishmoya lohem ulaham and divrayim. You're allowed to believe it. He brings a few rayas. One of them is from Avraham Avinu. The Gemara says that, Rashi brings it, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avraham Avinu that he's going to have children, it says, habeit nash say hachutza babeit. So Rashi says, what's say? It's a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos. Say meit stagninu shaloch. Avraham told HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I see in the Kechovim that I will not have children. So Hashem told him, say, mitztagnin shalach. You'll rise above it. You don't have to worry about it. So what do we see? That Avraham Avinu was discussing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu the inyan of itztagninus. And then he brings a raya from the famous Gemara with Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says a story that Rabbi Akiva, people that saw in the stars, told him that his daughter will die on the day of her wedding. And then in the end, she gave tzedakah to an ani, and in the morning she found that she pierced the maid's head with her pin. So Rav Akiva said, what do we see? Tzedakah tatzin memavos. He didn't say, oh, we see from here that they all narishkeit, that they don't know what they're talking about. No, it was very real. He was very worried about it. But with tzedakah, he was able to reverse it. And then he brings the famous Gemara with Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak. Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak, his mother, some Bali Kechavim Mazalis told his mother that he'll be a Chevreman. So she put on a yarmulke on him, and that he should have Yiras Shamayim, and that's why it's called a yarmulke. Yarei Malka. That's the makor of it, this Gemara. So what do we see from here, says the Ramban? That they were all choishish to what the Bali Kechavim Mazalis said. And they were really worried, and they did pa'ulos. They did pa'ulos based on what those Bali Kechavim Mazalis said. And the Ramban says, Pa'amim shakadosh baruch hu oisen nes li'reyav levatul mayhem gezeres hakoichavim. But it's real, it's a fact. Then it's something that's reversible. And he says that kol ha'torah tluya behem. And the reason why you're not supposed to minayin shoyalim b'koichavim, the bekaldiim, is not because there's an isser to believe them. It's because Tomam tiyam Hashem b'lekecha. We have to believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will save us and take care of us. We don't have to worry about what they say. But, says the Ramban, Imra bahem davar shaloi kirtzoinoi. If he sees from them, they tell him something, a piece of news that is something which is bad for him, what should he do? Oisa mitzvah, he should do more mitzvahs, omar b'tfilah. And he says, Imra b'tztagninus yom she'en toiv l'melachtoi, nishmar mimenu, he says. Do misoy mechalanes. And he says that I hold Saber Anisha also loving Neged Hamazolas. You're not allowed to fight and say, I don't care about the Mazolas, because it's a real thing. You're not supposed to be Soy Mechalanes. But, says the Ramban, HaRav holds differently, because the Rambam we just said before, that if someone is Oise Maise Mipnei Ad Stagninus, he's over on a lav, and he's loiken. And he says, Ushmata Kula Leisa Hochi. In the whole sugya, we've seen the Gemara not like the Rambam, and the Ramban dinkt sich on the Rambam. The
Ramban talking based on Yesh Mazel Yisrael.
No, he says we don't pass the Yesh Mazel Yisrael. But we'll see very soon what it means. Now, the same pshat and the same mahalach as the Ramban, the Mikra Yosef has the same mahalach in Sanhedrin, where he says the same thing. And basically what he says is, Nachash means if a person, how's a person over on Loisa Nachshu? when it has nothing to do with anything. It's just stam shtus, superstition. Peter nofel mipiv, makl nofel miyodoi, she'en behem dober chachma. What's the shaykhs between Peter nofel miyodoi and the job that he wants to start? And this he calls divrei shtus. If a person is makir in something which does make sense, and based on that he makes nachash, dobra chachma, he says. And he says that so that's the chilek that he wants to make. And the same thing he says, you're not allowed to take a koichav and say, okay, if the koichav is pointing that way, that means this, and if it's pointing that way, it means that. That's what lo so'inenu means, and lo s'nachshu. Avo masha odom makir b'mareches ha-koichavim mahalchon, which is the constellation and the horoscope. The people that look up in the sky and they look at the stars, Einzu b'chlal nachash shezu chachma gedoyla ugezeira shegozer HaKadosh Baruch Hu misheishes imei bereishis lahani goylomoy bekach al kein yispalal kol chosid levatl mimenu gezeiras hamazl ki me'is oden hakoil bo hakoil ubiyodoy leshanes velasis gecheftze. Novas then zog the Mikra Yosef. Imagine if a whole day we would walk around trying to find out each second what's the mazel now, what's the mazel now. We would go crazy. He says, Chachamim said, don't put yourself into it. And this is what he learns. He says, that's chat in the Gemara. Which means it's not allowed. Fakir. If someone goes against the mazel, he's doing wrong. Novas then, don't put yourself into it. Don't make it. Don't make yourself crazy about it, because a yid is above it, as we will explain very soon. And he brings the Rambam, and he says ve'eina mekra. So basically, we have a major machlokes rishonim between the Rambam and the Ramban Mikra Yosef. And the Rambam holds that anything based on kechavim mazalos is allowed, and the Ramban and the Mikra Yosef say no. Now the question is, all the kashas that they ask from the Gemara. We have the Gemara with Rabbi Akiva, with Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So the question is, how does the Rambam reconcile his mahalach with all these Gemaras that l'chayr are against him? Comes again the Darkei Moshe. And the Darkei Moshe says as follows. He says, I will tell you something here. He says, it's an umshat. The Afa Rambam like Omar, Elo be'inyonim shehein ein lahem mevoy berefus, which means, we'll explain it because we have a lot to cover, so he says Azoi, that there are two types of inyonim based on mazalos. There is something, he brings the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos, a different daf, that on Tuesday, B'Yom Gimel, lo yakis dam. You should not do bloodletting, which in the olden times was a very big part and parcel of a person's daily life. And it was part of, you went to the barber, and that's where you had, you see in the, where they show how they lived in the olden times, every person had a cup where that with his name on it, and that's where they let blood, and it was part of going to the barber. So every time you went to get a haircut or a shave, at the same time you got a bloodletting. And it was considered healthy. So the Gemara says, don't do it on Tuesday, because on Tuesday at certain time, Mazel Madim is on the top, because it's like a constellation, right? It goes, there's a way it goes. So on Tuesday it's on the top, so we're scared that instead of taking the amount of blood that you want to take, it's going to take out more blood than it should, and then it's really dangerous. So the Darkei Moshe says that the Rambam will be moida to such a type of thing, because even though it's not a scientific thing, ask a doctor, he'll tell you one has nothing to do with the other, but we can hear, it's something that we can hear. It's not stam abracadabra. So basically he's saying that something that has a seichel, has a hezber, has a mahalach, we can understand. But something that doesn't have a seichel, that's where the Rambam holds that if a person does it, he's over, because it doesn't make sense, it has no meaning. Now, and in order to explain the Darkei Moshe, we will bring, there's a very interesting Goen in Yeridei Simei Kufa in Tes, where he has it in with the Rambam, Well, he has it out with the Rambam, where the Rambam says there's a certain halacha which the Mechaber brings down, which is a Lashon Rambam. Misha noshchei akrov. If someone was bitten by a scorpion, mitter lulchash olov, you're allowed to say a lachash, which is in the Gemara, vafilu b'Shabbos, and the chiddush of vafilu b'Shabbos is the osir laharvas b'sicha. Imagine how far it goes. Shabbos you're not supposed to talk stamazoi, so if saying a lachash, you're going to be marba b'sicha, right? That's a chizik to our Shmira Shabbos. But he says, va'af al pi she'ein hadavar moil klum. The Rambam, it's a Lashon Rambam. The lachash doesn't help. Hoyle mesukanu, he's in danger because he was bitten. Hitiru kadesh le Torah of Date Olav, which probably is, we can trace this as the first makar in halacha to a placebo. According to the Rambam, this is a real placebo. It doesn't help, it's nothing. But if this is going to make him happy, you can do it. Says the Goyen, HaRambam, Kosef came. I will call haboim achrav cholku olav sharei harba lechoshim nemra b'Gemara. How could the Rambam say v'af al pi she'ein hadavar moil klum? It's in the Gemara. The Gemara gives the lachash. How can you say it doesn't help? V'hu nimshach, he says, achrav philosophia. V'lochein kosav shekeshofim v'shedim v'lechoshim v'kameyes haku sheker. Avol kvar hiku oisoi al kot kedoi. And so on. So basically, the Goyen is telling us that the Rambam had a certain mahalach here based on the philosophy that he studied, and everything had to make sense. And the emphasis is, it's not only the Goyen, there's a Tshuva and Rivosh that also speaks about it, because the Rambam has very interesting mahalchim in different things. One example is, in Parshas Vayera, we have all about the Malachim, and how they came to visit Avraham, and how they ate, three cows for the tongues, and the kids come home with the arts and crafts, right? We have a whole thing about it. Comes again the Rambam, and he says, this all was a dream. It didn't really happen. It wasn't reality. It was a vision. It was a vision that Avraham Avinu sat by the door, and he fell asleep, and in his vision he saw all this happening. And the Ramban lets him have it. How could you say that all this is a cholim and so on? But Lemaise, the Rivosh says that the Rambam would rather take such a thing and learn it shaloi kipshutoi, because to him, if it didn't make sense, then the Rambam would rather learn that way. Then we have other things by the Indian of the Ben Ashunamis with the Tchias HaMesim. The Rambam learns that he wasn't really dead. He was only paralyzed. So, Lemaisa, the Rambam has a mahalach that everything has to make sense in science. It can't just be hocus pocus. And therefore, the Rambam, when it comes to the inyan of learning Pshat, in the inyan of L'sanachshav v'lo yisaynenu, if it's something that's stam without any rhyme and reason, then the Rambam holds that that's also, right? But if, let's say, it's something that makes sense, which, let's say, for example, the inyan of not letting blood on a day where Madim is shoylet, there, the Ramah says that the Rambam will also be masking that there's no problem if you go by it. So, Lemaisa, that is the way the Ramah wants to explain the Shittas HaRambam. But Lemaisa, when you look in the Halacha, you see that the Mechaber and the Ramah paskin like the Ramban and the Nemika Yosef. And basically what they say is that the Ramah says, "B'mesh adam yodeya shehu neged hamazal lo yasa v'lo yismach al hanes." In other words, don't go against the mazel, because it's a reality, it's a metzias, it's there. And the zanish ka'oibuchufim. Elo she'ein lachper achar zeh mishem tamim tiyah. Don't be all into it, because there's an of tamim tiyah. But Avada, the Shulchan Aruch holds not like the Rambam, and they pasken like the Ramban and like the Nemuka Yosef. Now let's get back to the kasha that we asked before, that l'choire, what is the inyan of this between 6 and 7, and so on. So
it's a metzias, and you don't
the metzias doesn't mean it's scientific.
If it's a metzias, and you don't think about it, it's not like driving with your eyes closed. It's a metzias. Don't think about it.
It's a metzias that can happen, but a Yid believes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will lo yoneh l'tzadik kol rov.
Provided he doesn't look into it.
Right, but if you know about it, that's what they say. If you know about it, that means that you have to do something about it. But if like they say, what you don't know, it doesn't hurt. Right? If you don't know about it, then chances are that it will pass without any incident. Now, let's see Benoigeya, the Inyan of not making kiddush between 6 and 7. So according to what you just saw, not making kiddush between 6 and 7 is not something that has a seichel. What's the shaykhs of Mazel Maldim and Kiddush? We don't know. The Magen says so. So Lamaisa, according to the Rambam, it would have to be a problem. Because according to the Rambam, if something doesn't make sense, meaning it's not something that has a seichel and a hezber, it would have to be loisa oineinu. But Lamaisa, we don't paskin like the Rambam. We paskin like the Ramban and the Nemuchei Yosef, and therefore it's not a problem. And now Benoigeya, the Inyan of the Kasha of the Aruch HaShulchan, Benoigeya Ein Mazel Yisrael. So we have to know a very important thing. In the Sugya in Masechtas Shabbos, Ein Mazel Yesh Mazel, Rashi says, Azoi, what does Yesh Mazel Yisrael mean? She'ein tefila u'tzedakah meshana es hamazel. That's what Yesh Mazel Yisrael means. What does Ein Mazel Yisrael mean? Al yedei tefila u'zechus mishtana mazal l'toiva. And Toysa says the same thing. Al yedei zechus gadol mishtana. Pa'amim she'ein hamazel mishtana. So basically, we see from here that even we paskin Ein Mazel Yisrael, like the Rambam says, and like the Chassam Sofer says, it doesn't mean it's a blank check, Ein Mazel Yisrael. Ein Mazel Yisrael means that a Yid has a koyach with schusim to be mahapach the mazel and turn it into something positive. So Oy Bazoi is for both kashas. The kasha that we asked why there's no lo soinenu by not making kiddush between 6 and 7 is very poshut, because the inyan of according to the Ramban and Nemuchei Yosef, it's something that's mutter. It's not. If we know about it, it's something that's mutter. And not only that, but we shouldn't go against it. Now again, we're not saying that that's the halacha. Not everyone has that minig. But we're saying that people that have that minig are not over on lois soinenu. And the kasha of Ein Mazel Yisrael, that the kasha is, the Aruch HaShulchan says, how can we say not to make it, we're not under the mazel? Yes, we're not under the mazel, but that's only with tefillah and zechus. But it's tamazoi not. So therefore, a person should try to refrain, according to this shitta, to make kiddush between 6 and 7, because then it's a bad mazel. Now we're going to go, before we start to the next inyan of witchcraft and demons, shaidim, we're just going to have a few quotations here from different Rishonim on the topic of Ein Mazel Yisrael. Yes?
If you know about it right now, so now that we know about it, so then what gives us the right not to do anything about it?
So again, not everyone has that many. It's one shitta. It's one shitta. It's not, it's not the Shulchan Aruch, right? It's the Magen Avraham. Some people go with it, some people don't. So the people that go with it will say the kasha is not why we don't do it. The kasha is how can one do such a thing and not be over. So we're not over, but not everyone has that meaning. Basically, you have to do what you saw at home, right? Now, in the whole, yes.
When you say, how do you define what makes sense, what not makes sense? Say when the nafal
Pita nafal mepeh.
Right. I mean, you can also technically say it doesn't make sense.
That's superstition.
We don't understand it.
No, but that's called superstition. In other words, if a person is about to do something and the breath falling out of his mouth means that whatever it means, but that's all superstition. It's not. It's a feeling. It's not something that's scientific or something that has an explanation.
There's no logic.
There's no logic.
That's the basis like in Mazalis.
No, for sure not Mazalis. Yeah. That's only superstition. Now, in the inyan of Ein Mazel Yisrael, there's a few other mahalchim. The Rabbeinu Bechaya says that only a tzibur is Ein Mazel Yisrael. By a yochid, there is Mazel Yisrael. The Ritva says that the inyan of Yesh Mazel, Ein Mazel has to do every person lefitzit kosoi. That the bigger the tzaddik, the less you are under the mazel. There's another Ritva that says, very interesting, that afal pish Ein Mazel Yisrael b'chodesh av u'b'chodesh Ador Yesh Mazel Yisrael. That's how Ifa emphasizes the kasha of the Gemara Mishenechnas Av, Mishenechnas Ador. Then we have Alshich that says that only in Eretz Yisrael is a Mazel Yisrael, but in Chutz La'aretz Yesh Mazel Yisrael. And then we have a Maral that says that only Legaba the Inyan of Limud HaTorah a Mazel. No one can say that he became a Talmud Chacham, he had Mazel, he lucked out and he became a Talmud Chacham. You don't luck out to become a Talmud Chacham. You become a Talmud Chacham when you learn. So that's the Maral. And then
someone say it's just there, it's Yisrael.
Okay. And then we have another Maral that says the same thing, the difference between Klal Yisrael and the Yoch. So now we want to go and take it a step further. And we're going to start with a Rambam in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, where the Rambam says a very interesting thing. The Rambam brings down, we know that there are many aspects to the inyan of these type of things. There's a pasuk in Parsha Shoftim. Lo yimotze v'cha maver b'noi vita ba'esh koisem kesomem ma'oinen manachash mechashev choyver chover shoyel oy v'yidoini doira shalamesim. We have here a bunch of terms which the Rishonim all try to explain exactly what is every term. We're not going to get into it today. There's not enough time. And the Torah says, "Ki toyavas Hashem kol oisa'ela." The Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah says, "Devarim ha'ele." After he finishes off, the Rambam gives a description of every one of those that we just mentioned. The Rambam says, "Devarim ha'elu kulon divrei sheker v'chodaven." It's all baloney. It's all non-existent. V'heim shehitu ben oivtichav makadmoinim legoy ha'rotzos. The Goyim used all these type of things to be mata the Goyim, right? The lay people. Kadeshi nahagu acharein. Ve'in ro'u li Yisrael shem chachomim mechukamim. Klal Yisrael who are chachomim is not ro'u that they should engage l'imoshech ba'avolim elu. V'loi lahavas alev sheyesh te'helas behen. Avada not to think that there's some kind of reality to these things. Shenemar ki lenachash b'Yakov, v'lekesem b'Yisrael, and then he brings ki hagoyim ha'el ashat yorish oisam, which is the passage we just mentioned here before, that they are ma'oinim v'kosim mishmo v'ato lo yichein asan l'chashem l'kecha. Says the Rambam, kalamamin b'dvarim ha'elu ki yoytze bahen, u'bechashev b'libo shein emes v'dvar chachma, av la Torah offer son. He thinks the Torah doesn't let me, but in reality it's real. Einon elamin hasecholim imachasera hadas. He's a nar. He's a shoyte. Ibichlal hanoshim vaketanim shein datan shalema. Avo balei hachachma utumime hadas yedu berayis beruros shekol elu advarim she'asra Torah einon divrei chachma elotoyi vahevel shenimshecho behen chasera hadas. That's the shittas HaRambam. And as we saw before, that the Goyen says that most poskim are cholik on the Rambam, because the Rambam says everything, kishev and everything, masashedim, everything is hevel and shtusim. But the Goyen said no, that we find in the Gemara many things that were based, but this is the shittas HaRambam. Now we're going to bring a very interesting netziv in Parsha Shoftim. The netziv says as follows. He asks a kasha. The Torah says that don't do all these things. Biglal ha'to'evos ha'ele Hashem lekecha moirish oisam mipanecha. That the goyim from Eretz Canaan are being driven out because they engage in all these things. Tomim tiyam Hashem lekecha. Ki hagoyim ha'ele Hashem moirish oisam el moin velkois mishmo. Va'ata lo yichein asan lecha Hashem lekecha. Novi mikibucham ha'checha kamoini yokem lecha Hashem lekecha eloch tishmo. Frag the netziv, a gavaldige kasha. The Torah starts off as if to say that the Goyim are engaging in Arishkeit and Shtus, and you, Tomim Tiyam Hashem Elokecha. And then right away, what does the pasuk say? That Hagoyim Ha'ele, they engage in these things. Va'ata lo yichein asan lecha Hashem Elokecha, Novi mikir b'cha. You have a Novi. So the question is, why do we need a Novi to find out what the Goyim find out with Ma'onim v'koismim? If it's all Shtus, why? Well, if it's Tomim Tiyam Hashem Elokecha, that you're not supposed to, why are we supposed to go to a Novi? Shouldn't there be an Isser to go to a Novi? Isn't it against Tomim Tiyah? That's what the Netziv asks. And he says, a very interesting Yisoid, he says, Yesh lo das, the afagav the bahalichos ha'adam ba'oiloma shal atzmoi, yesh li es Tomim im Hashem, v'loi lachkar al sidus, mikomokum bizman milchoma, ve'in eitza berura, ba'areyus hakonas nefoshes, yesh lachkar v'lo das. He's saying a gavaldig Yisoid. The Torah says also, Lo yomotze b'cha all these things. Ki ta'avat Hashem kol ha'se'ela u'biglal ha'te'ev se'ela Hashem kach morish ha'etz mipanecha. Why? Because the goyim engage in these things even for private use. And then the pasuk says, Tomim tiyam Hashem lekecha. When it comes to private, it's Tomim tiyam Hashem lekecha. Don't al tachkar achar hasidus. Now the pasuk says, but there will be a time where even Klal Yisrael needs to know what's going to be, and that's when it's negeya for the tzibur. So the pasuk says, Ki hagoyim ha'eila shati yorish oisam. How do they find out things that are negeya for the tzibur? El ma'oinim vel koismim mishmo. Because you have a Navi. So he explains that the Navi was meant for the tzibur. And for the private sector, that is when the inyan of Talmud Tiyam Hashem Lekecha kicks in, that a person should not be choiker achar hasidus. And with that, the Netziv explains why we know the story with Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech was in a situation where Shmuel HaNavi passed away. There was no Navi. And he had to know the Plishtim were preparing for war. And he had to know what's going to be, what he should do. So he went to the Urim V'Tumim. And he asked. He didn't get an answer. Why didn't he get an answer? Because he killed Noiv Ira Kohanim. So it was a punishment that he shouldn't be able to have access to the Urim V'Tumim. He went to Nevi'im, small Nevi'im. He didn't get an answer. So he had no choice. He went to the Baal HaSoif. He went to this witch, and she brought down the neshama of Shmuel HaNavi to find out what to do. So it says the Netziv that is the reason Shel Shaul HaMelech HaTzadik, which means he did nothing wrong when he went to Shaul Ba'oiv. She'beferish divrei Torah ki ata loichen nosan l'chashem gech novi mekirbecha mevur shebizman she'ein novi ve'ein efoid ha'hechrach lishel gam ba'oiv. We find that he got an oynish. It's not because he went to the oiv. The oynish was because he was the one who brought on himself that he shouldn't get an answer from the efoid, from the Urim V'Tumim. And loshu v'levakesh mei Hashem shi'aneu al yidei dvarim shebekedusha. So we have here a very interesting mahalach in the Netziv that he says that be'etzem, this whole inyan is something, according to the Rambam, it doesn't exist, it's all shtusim. But according to the Netziv, he holds that there is something to it, it is a koyach. Now, but then Hashem tells us, you don't need that, we have a Navi. And Taka, when the Navi didn't work, that is when he had to go to the Oiv. Now, with that Hakdama, we're going to discuss a little bit the whole inyan of the inyan of Oiv, which took place in the time of Shaul HaMelech. So, basically, the whole inyan is in Sefer Shmuel, Shmuel Aleph, Kapitel Chav Ches, and there, the pasuk tells us that Shmuel meis, and Shaul Heisir HaOives V'Tayidonim. It's interesting that Shaul worked on it to eradicate all the Oive Bale Oive Yidoni, all these Avodah Zaros, all these type of things he eradicated, but obviously some were still in hiding. And according to one the shit in the Medrash, who was this Balas Oiv that he went to? She was the mother of Avner Ben Ner. So she knew how to hide. Her son was the general. So she basically had inside information, so she was able to, she wasn't killed. And Shaul saw that the Plishtim are already engaged. It wasn't like, they were talking about it. It was, they were actually in the offensive, they were already in position for war. And Shaul saw the Machna Plishtim. He was petrified. He went everywhere, he tried everything that was available to him, and nothing worked. Find me a Baal HaSoif. Even though he knew that he eradicated, but he knew that it wasn't 100%, so he knew that there has to be something, usually, where's the best place for the robber to hide his stash? In the police station, right? Because then he knows no one's looking for it there. So basically, she was the son, the mother of the general. So she hid and she was spared. So they told him, in a certain place. So he obviously changed his clothing. No one should recognize him. And they went to Eloisha Loilo. They went at night. So Rashi says it wasn't at night; it was day. But it was mamash a very dark moment in Klal Yisrael. So they went and he told this Baal HaSoif, I need you to bring down Shmuel HaNavi. He should tell me what to do. So the woman started telling him, like, she thought maybe it's a sting from the FBI is coming, that maybe it's a setup. So she told him, you didn't hear that Shaul HaMelech, eradicated all the Baal HaSoiv and that there was no one left? Like, why are you coming to me? What? So he swore to her, he gave her a shvuah that nothing will happen. So she asked him, who do you want? He said, Shmuel. And then, Vatera Isha Shmuel Vatizak. So Rashi says from Medrash that she saw that this is Shaul. She didn't know him, but how did she know it's Shaul? Because she saw that usually when the neshamas come down, they come upside down, with the head down and the feet up. And here he came regular. So she knew that it's because of the king of the shoyl. She knew that it's because of the shoyl. So she knew that after Shaul, Lo Marim Isani, why did you trick me? So in other words, you caught me by the act. So he said, don't worry. And he said, what did you see? And she told him what the message from Shmuel was. And basically, Shmuel told Shaul, why did you, Lo Marir Gastani, Lahalis Oisi. The Gemara says that when Shmuel was called, he went to Moshe Rabbeinu, because he thought that he's being called for a judgment, for Mishpat. So he went to Moshe Rabbeinu that Moshe should testify that he was Makayim the whole Torah. It was a whole production. You can have a whole shir just on this story itself, but we have to keep it short. So basically, he told him that Elokim Sormei Alai V'lo Yanoni Oid, and therefore I came to you. And it's interesting. Rashi says he did not mention that he asked about the Chosh Ve'if, about the Urim V'Tumim, because he was embarrassed. And this is one of the rayas that if a person does an Aveira and he gets embarrassed, then he gets Gan Eden, because we see that he went to Gan Eden. Anyway, so he told him that this is what's going to happen, that you're going to get killed, and which means that even though you're going to get killed, you're going to get your punishment in this world, but in the next world you get Olam Haba. So the question here is, there's a very interesting machloikus that the Radak brings down with this whole concept of the Baal HaSoiv. And he says, and in order to understand the Radak, we're going to start off with the Radvaz. There's a tshuva in Radvaz where he has a very stark kasha with this whole Inyan. And he says, because the kasha is even though it's in the first year, where in the first year the neshama is still in a lower level, the shoyl has a very hard time understanding how is it possible that a Baal HaSoiv, which is Tumah, should penetrate such a big tzaddik as Shmuel HaNovi. So the Radvaz says, Kol Yomai Hayisim Mitztayr Al Dover Zeh. I myself had a very hard time. Shmuel, he says that Chazal say that Shmuel was not Mavir the Baal HaOiv. Only Shaul was, so it was an oynish for him. But he says Ken Nijayin, because we see what's the midah keneged midah, and it says that the pasuk says Moshe v'Aharon v'Chehano v'Shmuel v'Koresh Shemoy, that he was shakol keneged Moshe v'Aharon. How could it be that he should get such a oynish? So basically he says, I will tell you what I think. And so first of all he says that the whole inyan of Baal HaSoiv is with Koyach HaTumah. And then he says that we believe that a tzaddik cannot be penetrated by anything, by anyone. So what happened here? So he says that when Shaul asked the Baal HaSoiv to bring Shmuel, so she did whatever she did, her abracadabra, to be able to bring down the neshama the way she did it always, with Haktar Eseo, V'Hashbo Eseo, and obviously that it wasn't possible to penetrate. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at that moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that he should come down b'derech Kedusha. In other words, she wanted to bring him down b'derech Tumah. And she would have tried, it wouldn't have worked. But because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to bring this message for Shmuel, to Shaul, that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, this time I want you to go down. And he says, according to the way he learns, it means there's no such thing as a difference between up or down. It's always down. The reason why here was up is only because it was b'derech kedusha, v'loy kederech shara oilim she'oilim derech haraglayim, and kederech oilim v'roshim zakov l'mala. Why? Because it was the inyan of kedusha, and that's why he says that Shmuel said, "Lo meir gastani lahalas oisi, ki lohoy bekoyach bal asoiv lahalas Shmuel, ulargizo mim nechosoi, elo b'mitzvas haboirei latakonos gufen tarosoi, lo yichaz shalom epnei oynish." And the Kitzer, the Radvaz learns that this whole concept was a one-time thing. Bala oiv have koyach to do it with erech tumah, but only not the tzaddikim. Here, the reason why even the tzaddik wasn't penetrated, it was a Gezeir Merkodesh Baruch Hu, and he says, Dvarm shel tamheim umeyazhem esaleis benuim alakdomas amitius. That's what the Radvaz says. Comes again the Radak, and the Radak brings a very interesting machloikas ha-go'oinim. The go'oinim have a machloikas, and he says that yesh meim oimrim ki lo diber Shmuel im shol. V'chaz v'sholem lo ola Shmuel mikivroi v'lo diber avolo isha otsa hakol baramoes. He's saying as though this woman was a very smart woman. She didn't know Shaul. If her son is the general in the army, in Shaul, if she didn't know who Shaul was, she knew who Shaul was. But in the beginning, she made believe that she doesn't know him. But he says that the whole inyan of Balas Oiv was a spiel. They had someone in the closet that was hiding, and whatever this person decided to say, they said, and it was make believe that it's coming from the closet from the dead person. And why did she say what she said? Because she knew that Shaul did an Aveira, she knew that he killed the Onoivera Kehanim, she knew all of that, so she assumed that this is what's going to happen. That's how one of the Goinim learned, that basically there was no truth to this whole thing. It never happened, and she was Makir Shaul. Now was then, Laharis Loiki Matzada Chachmei Kira Matzad over Zeh, Amr Lama Rimisani. It was all a spiel, all part of the game of how she played with Shaul. The derech balas oid lehevi ben odom shemadaber metoich machavoyoy. He speaks from a closet, veloshen namuch, and when Shaul came, nivhala, right away she got scared because she knew that Shaul is there to kill the balas oid. But when Shaul promised her, yada ki lamocha yeyotz lamachama, v'chol yisrael hoy b'pachad, v'yada mashal shol shor kanei Hashem, sama b'fia magid hadavorim hanemorim b'parsha. That's the way they learn. But obviously, it's very hard to learn that way. So he brings that the other Goinim say that it wasn't that way. Rav Sadi, Rav Hai Goinim, Amr Emasi, Karochi Gushteidish Asidus. It's impossible that she knew exactly what's going to happen, that he's going to get killed, and so on. So he's saying, Haboiri is Baruch Yichya Shmiel for the show. Basically, they also go with the Mahalach of the Radvaz, that this was a one-time exception, that Baal HaSoiv really have a koyach, but this was a one-time exception where it happened because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, based on the circumstances with Shaul HaMelech. So now we have a very interesting thing. So we see from here that according to the Rambam, it's not a yochid by learning that there's no koychas to these things. We have the Goinim already, some Goinim say that the Baal HaSoiv, which the Torah tells us, right? There can't be a Baal HaSoiv, that it was all a fake and a fraud. And basically, the same achloikas that we saw before, Lagaba, the inyan of Gechovim Mazalis, we have also by the inyan of Baal HaSoiv. Now, there's one more thing which we want to cover, is the inyan of Shadim. The inyan of Shadim, the demons, the Shulchan Aruch says, Maaseh Shadim Osir. Anything to do with Shadim is Osir, it's part of what the Torah asers. The Yeshmi Shematir Lishoel Bahem Ala Geneva. That if you want to ask a Shein Dalet of where is something that someone stole, then you can. The makar to this is a Rosh. The Rosh in Masechta Sanhedrin brings a raya that we see in the Gemara, a whole shakla b'tarya, whether what's Maaseh Shadim, what's Maaseh Kshofim. Says the Rosh, Yere, Kivin Reb Chia bar Abba Ba'abaya, Pirshilonu Mahin Maaseh Shadim, Umahin Maaseh Kshofim. They have a whole shakla b'tarya, what's Shadim, what's Kshofim. We have a raya, Shedata Maskemes, Shemaaseh Shadim, Eina B'chal Kshofim, Umetorim. Why? Because if not, Imas Shadim Osir, my nafkamina. What's a nafkamina? What's Shadim? What's Kshofim? It's all Osir. So the Rosh brings a raya from here that's a Ken Zayin that Masa Shadim is Mutter. And there are many rayas from the Gemara that there's an inyan of Masik Kshofim. The Gemara says, Ben Palmian, that they needed to abolish a decree, and he made a spiel that he told them to be there Motzei Shabbos. So he knew that they can't make it on time, right? They got an appointment, but the appointment was in such a way that there's no way they can make it at the appointment. So what did they do? They called this shed, and he took them on Motzei Shabbos, and they were there in a jiffy, and they made it into the king. That's one. Then there's a Gemara in Masechtas Eruvin. The Gemara says that they used to be the Yosef Shidda, that they used to darshan in, I remember it was Nedoah, Papadusa, and in the morning they said a drasha, and by the afternoon they already had the shir set over in the other yeshiva, which was many miles away. Because this Yosef Shidda, he took the shir and he recorded it, and he brought it on Shabbos, he brought it to the other place. And the Gemara brings a raya that the ain't chum l'mala me'asora. So Lamaisa, we see from there that they did use shadim. And the emes is, the Ramban, in the Bixenspanner brings down, he says, Vani Toma Ma'oid, Ki Shamati Bevirer, Sheminek Alemania, that's Germany, Lasik B'Divre Shadim, Umashbin Oisan, Umashalchen Oisan, Umishtamshem Ben Bekamen Yonim. In other words, they use them for errands and so on. The Sovrani Loimer, Sheyesh Loimer, the Maise Shadim Lechud, the Maase Keshofim Lechud, and basically it's like the Rosh that says that Maase Shadim is Mutter. However, the Trumas Hadeshen brings, the Bixenspanner brings down Trumas Hadeshen, and he says, Umaase Shadim Shetiru K'tzas Poiskim, Ra'inu Sheroiv HaNitfolim Lohem, Einem Yoitzim B'Sholem Etachas Yodom. In other words, if you start off with them, they have a koyach and they have powers, but if you start off, then you have a problem. Lochein shoymer nafshoy yirchak mehen. Now there's a very interesting piece of history which I saw in the Sforim, but someone downloaded it yesterday from internet. You can look it up. There's a certain practice which is called indolko. What is this indolko? So I saw it in the poskim. I saw the poskim bring it down. But here I have a piece of from the internet. If you want the whole piece, you have to pay. I only took the first part, like the introduction. So he brings a very interesting thing, that there was a certain he calls it a folk curing, a Sephardic folk curing, which was very common in Syria, in those areas, which was that basically there is two mahalchim with the Indian of Shadim. One is that you try to fight them off, right? You fight off the Shadim. This was a totally different concept. This concept was you appease them, you become their friends. What did they do? They took a room, they cleaned it out completely, and they took out anything that has a shaychus to Dover Shebek Kedusha. No mezuzah, no siddur. The patient was not allowed to utter a word, not a bracha. He couldn't, when he ate, he couldn't make a bracha. In other words, nothing that would interfere with them. And then they put all kinds of sweets in that room, sugar, honey, to give them as an offering. And based on that, they begged and they appealed to their passion that they should have Rahmanas on this person and give him back what he's lacking and so on. And this was called Indolko. You can look it up. It's Indulco. And he brings here that in Seattle they have such some kind of, someone is doing it or whatever, I don't know. But basically, there was one of the big Rabbonim. His name was Remenashe Siton. He was a Sephardi, and he sort of dedicated his life he wrote a whole sefer called Knessia L'Shem Shamayim, which speaks about this thing. Because what was the problem? The problem was that it was a big secret. The whole thing was a big secret. No one knew exactly what they're doing. It took a long time until they were able to find out and figure out and get down to the bottom of it. What exactly are they doing? Because no one, it was women. There were some women that had this thing, and whoever needed it, it was all part of a dark big secret. But I guess he did enough homework to find out exactly what it is. And what he brings out is that in order to engage them, you mamish treat them like a god. Because you offer to them and you bring them, you like worship them, and by worshiping them, that is how you gain their love and their respect, and then they'll do whatever you want them to do. Even though the Rambam holds that Shadim have no koyach, it's nothing, but we see from here that the Shulchan Aruch paskins that there is a koyach. There definitely is a koyach. The question only is whether one should engage with it or not. So, in closing, we want to finish off with the same line that we started with. We started with V'shenechnes Adar Marbin B'Simcha. What does V'shenechnes Adar Marbin B'Simcha mean? It doesn't say how you Marbin B'Simcha. So all the Svarim say, what is a Yid's real Simcha? Torah. Torah is what brings Simcha to a Yid. V'shenechnes Adar Marbin B'Simcha. What happens if a Yid is Marbin Torah? When you have the Torah, even if we have all these koiches like we saw before, but what does the pasuk say? Ki hagoyim ha'ele el mo'inim vel koisimim ishmo va'ata loichei nasan lecha Hashem Elokecha. Why? Because Navi mikirbecha ma'achecha kamoinu yakim lecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us Nevi'im. Who are the Nevi'im of our Dor? The Nevi'im of our Dor are the Gedolei Yisrael, the Gedolei Aposkim. And that is why, when a person has a Sofek, has a Shaila, he goes to ask Das Torah. And when you ask Das Torah, you can't go wrong. And when you listen to Das Torah, you'll hear certain things. You know, we have Gedolim today, like for example, let's say Reb Chaim Kanievsky. People go to him, they come out with such a stylus because he not only says yes and no, he can say certain things which no one knows and no one knew, and all of a sudden he's talking about it. These are all things that have to do with the Koyach HaTorah. What's his koyach? His koyach, the only koyach that he has is the koyach HaTorah. He has the va'ata loichei nasan lecha Hashem Elokecha ma v'mekirbecha ma'achecha kamoinu yakim lecha. And that's why, if a person is marvin b'simcha and is marvin Torah and he understands the gewaldige gift of Torah, he understands what the Torah does to us in our life. It's not only that we learn for an hour, but we become a different person. It changes us. We become B'nai Torah. When a person becomes a Ben Torah, all of a sudden, all these things, and again, the Shulchan Aruch Paskin is not like the Rambam. So Bala Oiv have a koyach, Shedim is a koyach, Kshofim is a koyach, Kechovim and Mazolis. These are all koyachas. These are all things. These are facts of life. This is a reality. However, we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to walk around being nervous that whatever's going to happen. Why? Because we have HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have the Torah, and we pass in Ein Mazali Yisrael, which means that a person is able to change all this with what? With Torah, mitzvahs, and tefillah. All these things, these are all the gifts that we have only because we are Erlich Yidden and we have the tools that can help us rise way above all these things. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us that we be able to be marve b'simcha and take steigen Torah in avoda in Yiras Shamayim, and then we won't need all these things and shomer nafshe yirchek mahem, and we won't have all these problems that comes with it, because when a person learns Torah there are no side effects. But when, as opposed to all these things, even if they are koiches and they are reality, but we just saw that the Shulchan Aruch says shomer nafshe yirchek mahem and so on. Why? Because all these things come with side effects. It's impossible. Something that's not pure is impossible that it shouldn't come with side effects. However, the Torah itself is pure and clean, and not only it's pure, it's so pure that it can purify us. If we learn Torah properly, it can change us and make us better people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us. We should be zoich l'chol habrachos hakasuas b'Torah.
Amen.